All righty. Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We will get started in just a moment. I hope everybody is doing well. I see we got some people joining in. Amazing. We've got an incredible discussion lined up for you all today. Very, very excited. Hello, Christina from Houston. Hello, Brandy. I'm excited for today's discussion. So while we wait just another minute or two while some of the folks who are running late join us, I just wanted to welcome everybody here. We are going to be covering the latest edition of the AI Success Series, the new rules of local search rankings. We're going to talk with an incredible guest speaker who I'll introduce in just a moment. But while we wait, happy beginning of March Madness, everybody. Curious to see who everyone has winning at the top of their bracket. I'm pretty sure mine might already be busted from the playing games, but excited to see kind of how things play out. It's going to be a fun few weeks. But we got a lot of people tuning in. We got Rashika from Canada, Rob from Portland, Corey from Houston. Actually, I'm going to be moving to Houston in September, actually. Yeah, so if you have any good recommendations on areas or restaurants, I'd love to hear that, because I am from Austin, but don't go to Houston very often. Same thing with you, Christina, too. But amazing. Cool. All right. Well, I think we can go ahead and get started. We got a lot of folks jumping in. Just a heads up, if you've already jumped in the chat, that's great. But if you have any questions, thoughts, if you want to say hello, please feel free to do that in the chat. But before I introduce today's guest speaker, let's finish through with some of these housekeeping items. So first, as you know, we have the chat. We also have a Q&A tab. So if you want to ask a specific question, or if you just want to ask a question in the chat, we're watching both. You can go either way. Also, on that window on the right side, you should see a Docs tab. And if you click on that, we have some additional links to guides, old webinar or our past webinars, and additional resources really just designed to help you continue your learning after today's discussion. And including, we actually just launched a new podcast. It's called the Local Business Growth Podcast. And essentially, we take some of our best conversations from our webinars where we interview, some of the best experts in the country or the world even on local SEO, AI, and
the
online
universe.
reputation.
The universe.
Seriously, yeah. I mean, yeah. And so we've got some amazing stuff. And so be sure to check out that podcast where we pull all the best highlights and clips, and we kind of recap everything in a shorter format. So if you don't want to stick around for a whole hour, you can catch the best parts in like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. Awesome. All righty. Well, also, if you are tuning in from the UK or Australia, you may be watching the rebroadcast of this, and so you won't be able to talk with us live, but don't worry, because we do have experts in the background able to answer your questions. I'm going to be back there too, helping answer your questions as well. So if you're not watching this live, don't worry. We're going to make sure to help you the best that we can.
How are they going to channel my unique personality?
I don't know. It's tougher when you have to watch the recording. You don't quite get that juice of the live stuff, but I have a feeling that we're going to provide some insights that will be helpful for people, whether they're watching right now or 10 days or 2 weeks from now. And Lakshan, the name of the podcast is the Local Business Growth Podcast. And you can find that, I believe, on Spotify right now. We're still working on expanding that out. But yeah, just a heads up from there. Great. Now, let me introduce to you today's guest speaker. Please join me in welcoming Mike Blumenthal. Mike is the co-founder of Near Media, along with multiple other ventures over the years. He's a legend in the local search space and is one of the top minds in the world of local search. You can also follow his insights and his thoughts on what's going on in the world of SEO on his podcast that he co-hosts with Greg Sterling, The Near Memo. And I don't think we have a link to that, but maybe we can have someone find that for us and throw it in the chat. But I was just listening to your most recent episode this morning, Mike, and you've got some great stuff. And I feel like as we were talking in the backstage of this meeting, we've got some things that we want to discuss too, some breaking news as well. But first off, thank you so much, Mike, for joining us today. It is an absolute pleasure to have you on. I'm really looking forward to hearing
the pleasure is all mine.
Well, I appreciate it. I think this is going to be a good one. It looks like we've got a couple people who found the Near Memo podcast, which is great.
Thank you, Chris and Stephanie. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so definitely be sure to check that out. Well, Mike, how are you doing? How's everything going? It's
Any
been a
day I
pretty
can ride
crazy
my
couple
bicycle to
weeks.
work is a good day. So today is another good day. I rode my bike. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm very, very, very happy about the weather as well as the time change. I'm a fan of the sun setting later in the day and us getting some sunlight after work, which is great. It's always depressing when you get off of work at 5:30 and it's already dark outside. So I'm excited. I'm happy for the sunshine. So Mike, we've been, there's a lot been going on. We were just talking in the backstage of this discussion about some of the most recent changes and kind of the evolution of local search. But I think a good place for us to kick off, and we can jump into those new updates here in just a second. But I think a good place to start is to first quickly talk about the overall evolution of local search. Especially, I'd love to hear your perspective because you've been doing this for a while. You've seen what it was like before Google, when it was, with the yellow pages, to where we're at now with some of these incredible AI capabilities. There's a lot going on. So can you quickly walk us through kind of the evolution of local search and how it's kind of changed over the years?
sure. The event that sort of turned my head was in 2005 when Google released their business listings to the front page of search. And then in late 2000, early 2006, they merged it into maps in an effort on one hand to compete with the yellow pages, on the other to compete with the MapQuests of the world. And I had up to that point been doing my prospecting using the yellow page books because I lived rurally. It took 9 yellow page books. And the only thing in the world more annoying than Google is the yellow page salesman. So it was a great relief for me to see this. And I, at the time, started my blog in 2006 because I thought that local search, that everybody, it would fundamentally change and invert the whole relationship of the world to the internet, where previously searches had been made by local people for global entities, eBay or PayPal or whatever. But this would change it so that global people could find local entities. And to me, I thought it was earth shattering. Started writing about it 2006 through the evolution of Google, and didn't get my first consulting job till late 2011. So I was 5 years, perhaps a little too early, but I stuck with it. I had another way to make income, which was website design and hosting. And it's been a fun ride ever since. I mean, local is the canary in the coal mine of entity search. It was Google's first effort to create a graph of things. And so all of the evolution we've seen around authors and movies and stars and music all started with local in this time frame. And they rolled the knowledge graph out in 2012, which created this people, place, and things relational situation where entity search started to come into play. And subsequent to that, they rolled out a number of features, but we started seeing, even as back as far as 2013, we saw a one day to the next, Google changed every hotel image in the local search results from an interior shot to an exterior shot. And how did they know that? Well, it was the earliest insights we had into their image AI and their image recognition. 2015, they rolled out Google Images, which demonstrated that they could literally extract social graphs, knowledge graphs, local graphs from images, which ultimately resulted in them being able to change images based on user intent and user queries. So you can see that now. If you search for engagement rings, the local pack will have pictures of engagement rings, but if you search for earrings, it'll have pictures of earrings. So they've used that knowledge to upgrade the results in local search. That result upgrade started very aggressively 2014, 2015, after they separated from Google Plus, which was an anchor around local's neck. We started seeing them getting much more depth into the knowledge graph, products and services, much more transactional, things like booking, messaging, those sorts of things, and much more visual, the integration of video and imagery more holistically into the local results. And then most recently, we're seeing the integration of Google Maps, or Google Maps data, which is this whole local stack of into their AI products. So it's been an exciting ride, and I'm glad so many people are interested in it at this point.
Yeah.
Finally, I'm getting ready to
Yeah.
move on. It's like, hey, it's been a lot of years, but move
Yeah.
on metaphorically. Into the happy hunting grounds, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Get some more time to cross country ski or at
Well, I've
least now
never
ride your
worked that
bike,
hard.
right?
I've always taken time to cross country ski and to bike.
That's
So I've
good.
never worked that hard. It's like if you don't have time to cross country ski and bike, you're working too hard. That's my
Yeah.
advice for everybody on the podcast.
Oh, that's awesome. The first tip of the day. Um, it's incredible. And it feels like we're kind of kind of like how you were talking about that first real big shift in the early mid 2000s. It feels like the last couple of years we're in a new shift or another one of maybe equal relevance. And that's with this introduction of AI, especially with things like AI overviews. And I know that there's even some newer things that are coming out as of the last couple of weeks. I know there's AI mode coming out. I believe that's still in beta testing. I think I'm
Yes.
still on the wait list for that. But there's some new stuff coming in, and they're really making some changes. And there's also some new players in the search space, with Search GPT and Perplexity. And I know there's a lot of people who are curious about, is this even one, how does it rank you differently than Google? Two, is it something that we should be paying attention to as a local business? Like, is there enough traffic? And then three, how do we do that? How do we show up on these platforms? And is it different? Do we have to do anything different? And so there's a lot of stuff going on, especially with AI. And as you've been talking about, Google's been refining these elements. They're tweaking things. They're making adjustments. And this new AI aspect has added a completely different layer. So can we talk more about that aspect and how AI is really reshaping the space as it stands? Mm-hmm.
Sure. With one caveat, and that people need to understand this is very early days. There are platform issues that still need to be resolved, like interface issues, like is it going to be speech or typing or both? Is it subtractive or additive? Or, in other words, is it a zero sum game or not? So, a lot of issues to be decided. And I don't think that anybody should get their underwear in a bundle for another year or two. I mean, it's moving quickly, but
Mm-hmm.
meantime, Google is the dominant player and dominance
Yeah.
referring source. Apple has been making a slow, steady play in that regard. Certainly, we may see some change coming out of Alexa or ChatGPT, but there's a lot of issues, and the game is afoot, as they say, but not at all clear. So, what you should expect today from me is a caution that don't lose sight of your customer, don't lose sight of your primary referral sources, don't lose sight of how you can live without the Googles of the world, and how to take better care of your customers. Those things won't ever change.
Mm-hmm.
These sort of details along the way might, but
Yeah.
it'll be a fun
Yeah.
ride. I mean, I think you should take the time to enjoy it and look, but don't like I said, don't get your underwear in a bundle anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it really is an exciting time to be in this space right now. I mean,
Yes.
it's transformative technology, and and if you really do love this world of marketing and SEO and local search and solving those problems, and this is a great thing because these are brand new challenges that you can take on and figure out, and it's fascinating because it feels like, as you were saying, it's moving fast and it's evolving so fast. It feels like there's just always a new update coming in. It's kind of remarkable. Search GPT came out in November of last year, and just the difference in the
November
experience that
2023. So it's a year and a
Search
half.
GPT, yeah.
Oh,
And
search
so,
GPT.
oh yeah,
But I
yeah,
would, just as a counterpoint, I got involved in local in 2006. It's been 18 years. And
yeah,
local didn't take off as as an important high activity, fast, rapid change till at least 10 years later, and really more like
mhm,
15 years later. Now, the rate of change maybe is accelerating, but it's still, we're looking at 2, 3, 5 years for
mhm,
this to settle out. So I,
yeah,
I agree
yeah,
that it's exciting times. And
oh
if you want
yeah,
to become the next guru of local AI, now is the time to start exploring. But be
yeah,
prepared, have another gig, make this your side gig, right? Don't,
yeah, Yeah, exactly. And it was interesting. I was just reading an article on LinkedIn, and this it speaks to this exact, just precisely. And it was this big world-breaking. Look at these numbers. Search GPT traffic has increased by 1,000%, and it's like, well, when the numbers were super low, 1,000% is not that much. And so, but
Correct.
the way that you see this when you are looking online, like the hype and kind of like that fear of like, oh my gosh, like do we have to change everything that we do just to make sure that we can show up on Search GPT because it's the new thing? But like you were saying, to take a breath, take a look. Yeah, Alana, 2006 was 19 years ago. That does make me feel a little old. But I think it's one of those things to just take a pause, understand where we're at right now. You can look forward to the future and plan for it. But a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today are some of those foundational pieces. Awesome. So let's continue on. And can you tell us a little? So actually, yeah, can you now let's talk to some of maybe these newer features. Like we've got Ask Maps about this place. We've got the AI mode. And I know that there's some other updates that you were talking about beforehand that are pretty relevant for local businesses today as well. So what are some of those like really what are those areas that you're seeing AI have that big impact on local businesses?
Well, we're seeing it roll slowly into the local ecosystem. It's probably
Mm.
part of the problem is that Google's initial AI efforts, there's two issues going on. If you look at ChatGPT or ChatGPT like companies, they don't have great local resources. They have to partner, they have to license the data. The data that's out there, other than Apple's local data, isn't very good. So, maybe they license from TripAdvisor and Yelp, but they have to assemble it from 27 different places. That's problematic. And on the Google side, they rushed AI out and didn't get local integrated until very recently with Gemini 2.0. So much of what was happening in local, the early AI tests in local were abysmal. I wrote them up maybe almost a year ago. They were slow, they were cumbersome, they didn't solve any new problems, and they got pulled. And ultimately, with the integration of the local knowledge graph into Gemini 2.0 as a sort of, along with search and YouTube, actually Gemini 2.0 is the first version that is good at local, and it does some intriguing things. One of the problems with local search, as we know from Google, is very constrained by geography. If you're standing on a street corner and you say, "What's the restaurant near me?" it's going to give you a quarter-mile radius. But if you are standing on a street corner with your wife and you're ready to jump in the car and go 2 hours for a romantic meal, it doesn't give you a very good idea where that romantic meal might be. So one of the big changes in AI is asking questions like that. I'm willing to travel 2 hours. I'm willing to, I'm looking for a funky romantic restaurant for an anniversary celebration. What can you tell me? And those kinds of more less brittle questions can now be answered with some semblance, and it will go out and look for what cities are within that range, what restaurants are within that range, which of those restaurants are romantic, which of those have sort of a funky element to them, and will hopefully try to give you an answer. And that's pretty exciting in
Yeah.
that it totally changes how the local algorithm works. Now, it's only for some subset of queries, but still, that's a big change. The
Yeah.
other change we saw is in the Ask Maps about this place, which they're rolling out to the desktop with a slightly different name, where it's sort of a replacement for Q&A. It's Q&A on Google Business Profiles, where Google would ask users to ask questions and answer questions. This basically looks at all of Google's knowledge graph, reviews, the website, and then third parties to answer questions about a business. And it's appearing in Google Maps at least on the iPhone and mobile at this moment. But it's basically assembles information to any query about the business in real time from a range of sources, sort of hierarchically arranged from Google data sources to reviews to the website to third-party resources.
It's fascinating. It's interesting to see kind of how this stuff is evolving. One of my favorite aspects of this Gemini, like you were saying, you can have these this next level of complexity to your questions with those caveats of like, well, it needs to be a little funky, but we are vegans or whatever, those things are. One of my favorite things though about this, and the biggest difference from a normal Google search, is the ability to ask a follow-up question. And
Right.
that's a big one to me because it adds that layer of that natural conversation. So it'll give you five responses. You're like, okay, well, what about number 3? Do they have any times available tomorrow night at 7? You can take that next step in that journey, and it's more of a conversation. And I think as voice gets more advanced, I'm sure we'll see some stuff coming from the Alexa. I've been reading a few articles about how they're trying to make some changes to that, which would be great. And I think that element to it is going to be interesting. And I think Mike, this is when we were talking in our very first call, kind of planning out this webinar, you talked about far down the future, your overall vision of search is going to be very, very different. It'll be almost native to your device in the sense of like, there won't even be like a Google page. It'll just be integrated into everything that you kind of do. And I think that's a really interesting thought in
Yeah, we're
terms
seeing
of
hints
how
of
it's
that
going to,
with both Android and Apple, where
yeah.
you ask a question that requires a local response or not a local response, and it literally layers right over what you're doing. And surprisingly, Apple has been developed. There's 2 key elements to success in this for these vendors. One is, great AI in all of its aspects, both machine learning and generative. And great knowledge graphs. In other words, AI by itself tends to hallucinate, but when you tie it together with a knowledge graph, like a set of finite data that exists in the local graph, you get real answers. So Apple has been, when nobody's been looking, been developing knowledge graphs in every major area you can imagine: movies and actors and classical music and regular music and TV shows and has figured, and local, and has figured out how to maintain those at relatively low cost, which is one of the problems with these big data sets, is keeping them up to date. And Google has figured that out. Obviously, they use a lot of user input, which creates its own problems. Apple has figured it out in a different way, which creates a little more reliable, but maybe less far-reaching data sets. So those are the 2 elements. And right now, Google is the only company that has both a reasonably good AI and good data sets. Apple has good data sets, but its AI is weak. ChatGPT has great AI, but weak data sets. We don't know what Alexa's got. We don't know what Facebook has. So as I pointed out, it's early in the game, but those are the elements you want to be looking for. Beyond that, you want to be looking to hardware, what platforms are people using, and inputs. Are they typing? Are they speaking? Where does it make most sense for which type of information? I mean, I think one of the things you're going to see is, in the end, local is about the user wanting to interact with the business. So it doesn't really matter how they do that, as long as they call you or drop in your door. If you're a publisher, on the other hand, publishing health information, I would be scared shitless at this moment. But if you're, a local business, I think this is only going to help you. It's going to give you more surfaces to show up on.
Yeah, and I think this relates perfectly to Kessa's question in the chat. They're asking, how can businesses that rely on regular organic site traffic adapt to decreases in organic traffic due to AI overview, zero-click search results? And I think this is a great segue to the next slide that we can put up for people. But we're just going to kind of highlighting some of the few challenges that may arise from these shifts in these AI implementations and stuff, and some of the potential challenges. So speaking to Kessa's question, what are your, and you were kind of just speaking to it, where if you're a publisher, you should probably be a little worried about these AI overviews, these zero-click search results. But as a local business, customers are still trying to get to the local business. And so what are your thoughts on AI overviews and zero-click search results as it relates to the local side?
Well, first, let me just ask Kess to clarify whether she is speaking about local businesses or a non-local business. At Near Media, we ran into this problem. We did the same thing at Near Media with content and blogging, and Google wasn't sending us traffic. We were doing excellent content, innovative content. Nobody else is doing it. As Donald Trump would say, beautiful content. And yet we weren't seeing the rewards of large number of people at the top of the funnel coming down. And so we put it behind a paywall. We to give the people that really cared about the content, or behind at least an email of a paywall of some sort, that people who really wanted the content could invest in it. So for us as a content provider, in content that is so fresh that no AI knows about it, we took an exclusive approach. That's how we responded. In terms of local, I think you need to be everywhere all the time, kind of approach. And I think that you need to do what you've been doing: great website content, siloed content, schema, all of that stuff, and brand building, which is something that's been important in local, not widely recognized in the general SEO industry until the last 6 months, but year. But and then all of that is in the context of how do you best take care of your customers? How do you turn a customer you get from Google or ChatGPT into a direct relationship, right? So the funnel post sale, I think, is, if you are weak in that, it's an area of tremendous opportunity. So if you're a plumber and all of a sudden your leads from Google dry up, you've got a great set of previous customers. You reach out to them and say, gee, I've got some time on Thursday in the afternoon. Does anybody need anything? That way you don't have to pay for an ad that you're renting. You don't have to struggle about your rank on Google. You have the relationship with a broad base. So, and then, like I said, be everywhere. Now, being everywhere in this world means beyond Google, beyond digital, you want to be generating, you want customers to be doing brand searches for you. Either you put up a great big billboard that says, go to our Google listing and find our this week's special on the offer, or some way to generate these brand searches, maybe newspaper articles, relationships with local authors or bloggers to be writing about you. Well, on two sides to that, we're seeing just the mention of your business without a link being very valuable, particularly the higher profile publications. And we're seeing that the number of brand searches seems to increase your exposure in terms of other local keyword searches. So getting people to do brand searches for you, look for you on brand searches. Like I have a local car dealer that says something like 5,000 reviews on Google. Well, people go and they check and they type in the car dealer's name. Google sees there's a lot of brand searches, and then they elevate that business for other searches.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that too, I mean, and all of this stuff too is relevant for these AI search engines and Google. And that's something that I've learned a lot too, or have noticed a lot, is the things that help with these AI search engines and with Google, a lot of them are very foundational. Kind of like what we have here on the slide, where the fundamentals still matter. It's that accurate NAP info. It's your reviews, the quality, the recency, the frequency of them. It's having high quality images and high quality content that's truly helpful. Kind of going back to your core point of, you are trying to provide the best possible service and information for your customers. So optimizing for people is key, and that truly helpful information. Because especially now with everybody becoming a pro at ChatGPT, they're spitting out content like crazy, but a lot of that is garbage. And you can still, I personally think you still use ChatGPT and there's AI to help create content, but you have to be very diligent about how you're doing it and careful to make sure that it's truly helpful and supportive.
And something you mentioned that is important and glossed over to some extent, which is imagery. Google understands the intrinsic content of imagery now. They understand if it's an image of a dentist, or if it's an image of a doctor, or if it's an image of a lawyer. They tend to understand that. If it's a product, they understand the brand and the content. And consumers understand that too. So images not only need to be high quality, fresh, relevant, and real. Our consumer behavior research shows that people hate stock photography. They also have to be able to be seen by the AI as representing what you want them to represent. So you need to test them both for basic appeal as well as AI understanding. And then
Yeah.
you need to keep them coming because, and on both your website and on Google as much as possible. I mean, depending on the vertical you're in, a lot of people, like in the restaurant vertical, we saw in our research, a lot of people look at images cursorily on Google, but then go over to the website to make sure that the feel of the place was
Mm-hmm.
appropriate. We saw the same thing in physician research where they got a general idea. Google, they went 20 deep in the finder looking for reviews to want the three best. And when they got to the website, they were looking for pictures of people that look like them. So it was important to show a diverse, caring staff so that when they got there, and then they also, and this goes both ways, not only should your photos go to Google, your reviews from Google should go to your website. Customers love seeing reviews every place,
Yeah.
ratings every place. They don't necessarily
Yeah.
read the reviews, but
Yeah. They're massively important for adding that next level of trust, especially in this AI world, when you know that and that's the hard part too with Google and that's a challenge that people are facing is this a real review? I feel like that it's worse on other platforms, like with an Amazon product review. It's crazy how some random, rubber band holder can have 10,000 reviews, but I think with Google, it still has a pretty authentic sense to it. When people read reviews, they tend to think that it's a real
people
review.
trust them. But
Yeah.
what we see is that in the United States, particularly, only about 20% of the people actually read reviews. They use ratings as a proxy for
Mhm.
quality. So, like in
Mhm.
the physician searches, they would go into the local finder, which I thought nobody ever did. They would go 20 deep in local finder, looking for three of the best physicians, and they would base that best on the ratings and
Mhm.
quantity of reviews. So 100 reviews, 4.7, 4.8, they fairly narrow band of acceptable ratings from
Mhm.
4.7 to 4.9. And they would then take those three and explore more deeply on the website. Now, in the case of storage, the use of reviews was totally different. They would find places that were cheap and close to them because what's one storage same as the next, and they would use reviews to reject them. In other words, this company got criticized because it was too close to a bar and it didn't seem safe or
Mhm.
whatever, right? The
Mhm.
reviews wouldn't be a positive attribute, they'd be a reason for rejection. So
Mhm.
just interesting how these behaviors, and this is one bit of advice to everybody here, behaviors vary dramatically by vertical, by the importance of what it is they're looking for. And it's diametrically opposed depending on the vertical you're in, which are the most important things.
Yeah, and we'll dig into the industry side a little bit more as well.
Okay.
And so, sorry, I have two different sets of slides that I want to make sure. And so, based on these challenges, this is kind of what we're seeing is, the zero-click searches may not be quite super relevant in terms of how they affect website traffic for local businesses because that intent is generally different. A lot of those AI overviews and zero-click searches are more for those informational type of searches. Um, and when it comes to those core foundational pieces, those are always going to be there. Your reviews, your accurate information, and then like you were saying earlier, like when it comes to potentially seeing a dip in traffic from Google, you have to leverage your current customers, whether that's with referrals, finding ways to continue that customer loyalty. That's one thing that Birdeye does really well is we have a referrals tool that does automatic requests and things like that. So even after the transaction, you can still keep that relationship going with text messages, reminders, surveys, things like that. It's really cool. So let's dig into maybe some of the more evolving ranking factors. And so you had mentioned brand prominence, and you also, you said that brand is something that has been important for a long time, and it's just really now kind of coming into the spotlight. And oh yeah, I could see that. Yeah, Jared, that is an entirely different webinar. But I do think it is interesting how when we watch the kind of the narrative of local marketing right now, brand is a big piece of it. And I think for me, it makes sense because I feel like these AI search algorithms are kind of searching like a human. They're looking at the brand. They're looking at not just reviews, they're looking at everything. So what exactly, can you dig more into that brand prominence side and exactly what does that mean? how can businesses look at that or approach that? Yeah.
Right.
Also, I think
So my
there may be
background
a
noise
look.
is
Yeah.
is I'm in a third story building and it's very windy outside, so I don't know anything to do about it. I apologize if it's bothering you. I'll try to change the angle of my microphone to see if I can block it a little bit. Hopefully that's better. So the wind whistling is mine. Sorry.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know. It was 2008. Eric Schmidt said, "Brand is how you separate the wheat from the cesspool of the internet chaff." Um, so clearly, Google was aware that brand was important, but brand is an abstract human value. When they quantify it when Google quantifies it, they typically quantify it by brand searches. In other words, if they see a lot of brand searches, they think the brand's more important. Or if they see a lot of links on the brand, they think the brand is more important. So the link part of it has largely been led by large brands. They have these powerful link structures, and because of their other advertising, often have increased queries. But in the context of your local market, Google's still probably using the same metric. In 2009, 2010, they used to send out these uh, places awards that you were a popular place. And it was at that time based on quantity of brand searches. So, I mean, there's two sides to it, as I mentioned, but in terms of and you can understand how brand searches is a fairly easy metric for Google to track, right? They own Chrome, which is a big share of internet traffic. They can see how many brand searches that person has. And in some of the leaks that came out in 2018, 2019, 2020, 2022, whenever they were, as well as the Department of Justice case, it became clear that brand was actually a measured thing. So there's two sides to it, as I mentioned before. One is brand mentions, because local is entity based. They don't need links to create powerful relationships. They just need mentions. So if you get a brand mention in the New York Times, it's incredibly powerful. It's almost as good as having a link from the New York Times, and Google sees it as a vote for that brand on the one side. So that's in terms of brand significance. On the other is this brand query metric, which is a more timely thing, which goes up and down over time based on what you're doing. I mean, that is a function of getting consumers to look for your brand and on an ongoing basis, searching for you, and it will help every one of your keywords. We know from the leaks that Google is using these queries to elevate you in the ranking and to show you more. So anything you can do to both get the brand mentions, even without a link, anything you can do to get the brand queries, those two things are going to serve you very, very well.
Do you, would this also be expanded to social media when it comes to brand prominence?
I think so. It's hard to test, but it certainly seems that AI, like ChatGPT and Gemini, are paying attention to the Reddits and the social medias of the world. So the answer there is, I think so. Again, it's not clear. I don't think you mentioning yourself all the time helps. I think other people sharing your stuff and mentioning you is likely what's going to help. So having shareable content.
Definitely. I've noticed that a lot in some local search results, especially with Instagram. There'll be a lot of Instagram posts of videos of someone like, here I am at, Serrano's Mexican restaurant in Austin, or whatever it is. I'll see Instagram and Reddit are the two social platforms that I see a lot on the Google search results, obviously, and then YouTube, right? But I'm starting to see that more of it. I wouldn't be shocked to see that happen more in terms of social media, like outside of just the Google system. It's these models are getting better. They're able to scan across multiple platforms.
Right. The problem is that Facebook is semi locked down, right? You have to log in. It's illegal for these AI companies or for scraping companies to get to some of that data. So some of that's closed garden, which is why Google contracted with Reddit, because it isn't locked down and they have a lot of the information that they can use for both training and for search results and for entity ranking, all of those things.
And you mentioned earlier, in terms of you mentioned how businesses need to make sure that their data is very structured. And this is something that I think people have started to notice and talk about more, especially as it relates to these AI search engines and how they crawl, scan, or analyze business. How important is it to make sure that your schema, markup, and those types of things are well organized?
You're dealing with a lot more information retrieval now than you were 2 years ago. Right? Every AI is wanting to gather this information, and they do best with structured data. So it makes sense that you have clearly, and even if you go to Apple developer docs, you'll find Apple is looking for schema. We know Microsoft yesterday or the day before in Munich at SMX mentioned that schema was informing their AI results. So we know that schema, which isn't a ranking factor, it's largely a clarity factor. It helps these engines see your business more clearly because it's marked up in a structured way that they can then repeatably identify. So schema isn't, so things like your business address only needs to be on maybe your homepage and your contact page in schema. It doesn't need to be on every page. Reviews, you might be best off by marking them up as local reviews if they're relevant to the different pages. For example, I don't know if Birdeye does it, but I know that GatherUp, where I no longer work, did it, where you could parse reviews on a topic and have all the ones about engagement rings on the engagement ring page, all the ones about jewelry on the jewelry page, and mark those up as local reviews in the context of your schema. That's very helpful. Now, and it doesn't necessarily get you stars. It might not, depending on a number of variables, but it's information that will help these businesses. For example, I was asking Ask Maps About This Place about Barbara Oliver, who does that, marks the reviews up, and the AI there saw the reviews on our website and used them to inform its answer. So we know that the AI is looking at it and at the structured markup and leveraging it in their answers. So it's, I wouldn't go crazy about it, but I would certainly make sure it's implemented correctly.
Yeah, yeah, and Birdeye actually does do what you were talking about with our new Insights AI tool. It's insane, but yeah, we do that kind of analysis as well. But one thing that is important with this structured data thing is it becomes more important with more locations and business locations.
Yes,
so these multi-location
absolutely.
businesses, why is that? Why is it more important with more locations?
Well, it's easy for these search engines to get confused, or the AI engines to get confused. If they see multiple locations on a page and they can't tell one from the other, it's very, very, they can't tell how many you have, which ones are where. So it becomes increasingly important the more locations you have to be sure that your schema is well done. Because again, it's a clarity signal and you need your locations to be distinct from each other. And this provides the architectural structure for that to happen.
Yeah, and we did get a question, what is schema? And we had somebody else, thank you, Bridget, for the answer in the chat. Bridget says, in a nutshell, a schema is a structured framework or blueprint that organizes information, whether it's a mental model, a database structure, or a pattern of thought and behavior. Would you say that's pretty accurate?
And there's standardized syntax from schema.org that all of these guys agree to use. So there's standard format for local business, for local products, for discounts and prices, for reviews and review stars and review ratings. So they all can read it. And it's usually available as a plugin on most of these new modern website builders to provide it. And like I said, with a single location business, it's a little bit less important. But in the case of Barbara Oliver Jewelry, we saw it showing up in AI responses in regards to reviews. So it does seem to have even value there.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm looking at the comments. It's a great conversation.
Sure.
So he's asking, is this something that the business controls or software? He's a small business owner, not a developer.
The best way to implement it is on the back end of your website. having a plugin that automatically organizes it for you. So whether
That's
it's
awesome.
WordPress, there's a Yoast plugin, there's different ways to do it, but it's best to do it through the format of the website. That way it automatically will get updated if you update the information that flows into the structure. You shouldn't have to, in today's world, you shouldn't have to get your hands dirty with the code, but you can use ChatGPT to actually write the HTML for you to do it if you want it, or Claude or any of those, and then you can drop it in, but you shouldn't have to do it. You should be able to use your website building tool to do it.
Definitely. Yeah. And points for you, Jared. You did get that answer in there. The dev backend, unless you have a specific plugin, you nailed it. That's great. So, Mike,
Yeah,
we
so
did talk.
Justin, just a note, Jared, Justin's going to send you a year's free subscription to a Birdeye.
Probably not. I don't know if I can get that. I have that
what?
power, but I will.
I want to see if I can sink Justin's career in 5 minutes.
I'm just a webinar guy.
Okay, sorry.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared. I appreciate it. He'll take me in.
Good.
Well, we were talking about this industry specific side, and I wanted to get back to that because I do think it's really important. And especially in this audience, I'm sure we have a ton of different people in a ton of different industries. And I think it's important for people to know that not every industry is treated the same. There are different priorities, different, signals that may be more important. Can you dig into that a little bit more? Maybe a couple of examples of how industries are different?
So let me try to create a mental model for people. We do consumer behavior research. So we give them a problem, go to Google, solve this problem, and we see what they look for, what's important to them, and how they actually do it, and what Google presents back. So if you imagine in the upper right corner is a lawyer with a life-changing problem, that's sort of a gravitas, important issue. And on the lower left side might be a storage, which is much, much less important. And then maybe on the other lower right is a physician, which is important, but you can switch them pretty easily. And above that might be a kitchen remodel, which is expensive, not easily redone. But so you have these different consideration levels of the query. In the case of storage, people care about price and proximity primarily. So they might go into Google Maps, scroll around, find the places that are close to them, and then look for the one with the cheapest deal, or 3 with the cheapest deal, and then reject 1 or 2 because they have bad reviews. That's one behavior, and that's dramatically different than what you'd see with physicians, where they're looking for the best. They then go out to the website. Once they've gone into the local finder, pick 3 or 4, like again, from the list of 20 that looked pretty good. Go to the website, make sure that they look like they're in their tribe. If it's a person of color, they're looking for people of color. If it's a woman and it's an OBGYN, they're looking for a woman. These kinds of obvious things, which is where pictures come into play. And once they get beyond that, they look at things like, do they have appointments available? Those types of things. Whereas with a lawyer, they're looking for years in business in addition to quality reviews. So they're more likely to drop into the organic and make a choice there. Not that they won't go into the local finder. Maybe they'd go into organic 55% of the time and 40% of the time into local, and the other, whatever is left, 5% were done with ads. Most people don't like typical ads, but in that case with the lawyers, Google would then throw in a LSA ad, which had years in business and review stars, and it would dramatically shift user behavior. So instead of it being 55, 50, 45, it would be a third, where people would go back to the local service ads because it quickly and easily answered their primary questions about years in business and as a proxy for seriousness, and review stars as a proxy for quality. So this model on the one side, lower left side is price and proximity. On the upside, it's gravitas and reputation. On the lower right side, it's reputation, but some proximity. They don't want to be traveling 2 hours to go to a doctor. And maybe in the case of the home repairs, it's reputation and image. What kinds of things, the gestalt of the product. So these are different needs. People behave differently. Google gives them different information. Ultimately, you need to know in your vertical what people find the most important. So those are the things that you can emphasize.
Mm-hmm.
In the legal vertical, what we saw was people getting the organic and saying, God, all these title tags look the same. I can't tell one from the other. And then one of the lawyers had marked up reviews and they won because of the marked up reviews,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they had Schema Star reviews on their listing,
Mm-hmm.
contrary to Google guidelines. Did that summarize that well enough for people to understand?
No, I think that's great. And it's so interesting and this is what I love about the SEO world in general is like all these things change, but when you really nail down into it, it still comes back to the core foundational pieces of, like you said, those reviews, the accurate data, and helpful content that's truly, or even if it's just information on your Google business profile, information that's truly helpful, and it's the stuff that your customers or clients are looking for, and it's information that they actually need, and it's not just keyword stuffed listings or whatever, but it's truly helpful information. And I think that's a big piece to think about, with whatever industry you're in. Take a moment to really try to imagine what your customer journey is like. Go into Google, pretend you're a customer. Don't put your own business in your mind as kind of a bias. So you put in an extra couple keywords of the search or whatever, but truly try to walk in their shoes and understand how they can find your business. And when you look for that information, or when you do that, you'll notice like, oh, well, you know what? We should have these services here. People will want to know that. And so I think that's a super, super important piece to remember is like, the more things change, the more they seem to stay the same when you really nail down to it when it comes to this stuff. Hannah had a great comment. Quality and human first info organization is everything. And I agree. I think that's great. So, Mike, when it comes to, you've given some incredible pieces of advice so far. And again, if you're in the audience, if you have any questions, we still have about 8 more minutes. So if you have anything that you're curious about, if you have any questions for Mike, be sure to drop those in the chat. But let's talk a little bit more about how to prepare for this AI-driven future. And we've talked, some of these are a little bit, kind of some takeaways that we've talked about. But if you had to give people here a few tips or, just straightforward advice on, how they can walk away from this discussion and go into the future, what advice would you give them? Well, and it doesn't have to be these 3 on the slide either.
But it is largely these 3. I mean, your website needs to say who you are, what you do in detail. In other words, every product or service needs its own page, and where you do it. Those are called silos, and those content silos should be clear and obvious both in your navigation and in the content, and it should be reinforced with schema. In terms of owning your customer relationships, you live in a world where Google is big, Facebook is big, ChatGPT is big, and you're small. And ultimately, you shouldn't have to rent your customers back every time. You need a direct relationship with them, depending on your business type. Some businesses, this works better than others. But if you are in a business where you don't always need new customers, then you need to be tracking with every customer email address and text number and getting their permission to communicate with them, and then establishing regular communications to keep that, again, customer focused communications. I don't want to hear from my healthcare provider that they want to review. I want to hear things that are relevant to my health. So keep that relationship going. And then finally, this brand building. We've talked about that a lot, but we think that it's a vastly underemphasized area, whether it's supporting the Little League or whether it's taking out a big billboard or appearing on local interviews or getting articles in the newspaper. We think brand building is, I think, as probably more important than link building. Personal opinion, a lot of people wouldn't agree with me, but it's okay.
No, I agree with you. And I think that's going to become more important over time, especially as these models evolve and they are more human. They're going to be looking at those types of those data points in that perspective. And your overall brand is going to be really important. And every little mention, like you said, sponsoring a Little League team or, getting involved with the local media, whether it's a, local business spotlight, segment or whatever it is. Getting involved in that stuff is going to be,
and just being sure that the ones you get involved with are also publishing it on their website. In other words, your presence need to be both local and virtual. So Little League, go to their website, make sure that your sponsorship banner that's on center field is also on their website so that Google can see that.
Yeah, Colleen has a great comment. Too many people look to search to solve everything for them and get quick ROI, but they can't Google you if they don't know you.
Correct.
I think that's a great piece of advice.
And Surat asked this question: have you seen evidence of Google crawlers favoring pages that are more clearly organized with more brief text and bulleted text? Really, the question needs to be rephrased is, do consumers respond to it better? Because what we've seen evidence of is Google tracking customer engagement through Chrome with the website. And if you can get them to convert, go to a second page or click on a form, or if you can get them to stay and read, then Google through Chrome knows that and reinforces that with bumps in the results. So the answer is Google does track that, but I don't think it's at the technical level. I think it's at the user level, which is where we should be worried about. Are the pages converting? Does the consumer take the next step? Google will reward that behavior.
Yeah. Would you say that's something we know for certain now based on that leak from late last year where that user,
I think it came out of the DOJ trial, so it's even, but yes.
Oh, that's a whole nother webinar too in its own on that topic. But I think one of the important things to do is there's a lot, we've talked a lot.
It's called Nav Boost if you want to look it up.
Nav Boost.
It's called Nav Boost. Yeah, that's the actual technical
is that
name.
NAV?
NAVBOOST.
NAVBOOST. I'm not sure if that's one or two words. I'm putting that in the chat for everybody. One word. Yeah. So don't. So remove the space that I added.
Remove the space.
And, we've talked a lot about these different strategies. It's important to generate reviews that are frequent, high quality. It's important to respond to them. We didn't dig too much into that side of it. But as we know, it's not so much an SEO ranking factor, but it's more of a consumer conversion factor of that response and being able to put your side of the story of a negative review, or just adding context, or showing people who are reading reviews that you're paying attention. And as you were saying, even with the complexity of more locations, it adds that important, it makes that structured data and that schema more important. But when it comes to managing multiple locations on your online reputation, it can get really complicated really fast. And especially if you are trying to implement the strategies we've talked about today of generating reviews, managing your insights, tracking your competitors or keeping track of what they're doing, building your brand on not just Google, but on all these different websites and platforms from social. And that's one of the things that Birdeye does really well, is it allows you to do all of this. So from managing every single Google business profile, Facebook page, Yelp profile, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever it is, Bing, you can manage every single platform from one place, making sure all your information is accurate. So at the beginning of the cycle, that you're at least in a good spot to begin with all of that foundational NAP information, all that good stuff. Then once you do get a customer and you send them review requests, you can have that completely automated. You can have your responses completely automated. And it's with, advanced AI that we implement. So it's not just like a template of 10 responses for a 5-star review that it'll choose from randomly, but it actually understand the context of the review and respond personally. Always make sure to read it and then approve it. You don't have it get sent automatically. You can't, it's not a good practice to just have AI go rogue on you like that. You want to make sure everything that gets pushed out publicly by AI is very well thoroughly reviewed. But as you were saying earlier, if you can't rely on that organic Google data anymore or Google traffic anymore, nurture those relationships with your existing customers. And that's something that Birdeye does really well, especially in the messaging side. So not even just sending a text for a review, which we can do automatically, but messaging them for reminders. If whether it's a 6-month checkup after they got an oil change and they're probably due for another one, or referral links. So to help grow your local network, if you're like a local service area business, a buddy of mine is a local like landscaper here, and he lives and dies by referrals. And so with the Birdeye platform, you can manage everything, including your social media. So from the very beginning to just having your information accurate across the entire internet, to during the transaction, whether you're trying to set an appointment or book something or even process payments, and then after the fact to keep those people coming back. You can do everything from Birdeye, including your social media. It's pretty remarkable. But it looks
So I'm
like
going to interrupt this ad with a public
Yeah.
service announcement real quickly. You should visit nearmedia.co, read my most recent analysis piece on Google's suspensions increasing dramatically over
Yes.
the last 3 months, and on the incredible delay in terms of filing an appeal. It's gone from 5 days to 5 weeks. And as a result, I would suggest over the next couple of weeks until this is resolved that you not touch your Google listing. Don't breathe on it. Don't change it, because it appears that changes are precipitating this suspension or re-verification. So I just wanted to sneak that in.
Oh,
and
yeah,
sorry.
definitely. And if you wanted if you wanted to touch on that some more, this is a pretty big breaking news type of thing. So can you give us, I know we're a minute over time, but if you've got a couple minutes, can we break that down in terms of what exactly are you referring to, and what is,
So I've been
why should they be
tracking,
making changes?
I've been tracking forum posts about businesses being suspended and businesses not being able to get reinstated in the 5 days that Google states. From January, those numbers have gone up every month. Last night, Google admitted that they're having an issue with re-verification, which is a related problem in bulk accounts for large accounts. So two sides of the same coin, that businesses are being pushed into a non-verified state, a soft suspension or re-verification state. It appears that there's been some change in the Google quality trust algorithm. And if you make a change, it seems to trigger this suspension. The problem is that if a suspension occurs now and you don't get your paperwork quite right, the appeal could take 4 or 5 weeks, leaving you invisible or with low visibility or low access to your listing. Google did finally admit that they said something. It started last week, which we know is not true, but we'll give that to Google. It appears to have started in, like I said, mid-January. So anyways, if you want to read the details, go to nearmedia.co and read the article.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that link, Aaron. Aaron provided a link in the chat. Awesome. Well, we got one last question from Elisa, and then I think we can close down for the day. But she's asking, Google shows results in the next city over before my business in the city they are looking for services, i.e. auto body repair shop Belgrade. The search shows results in Bozeman before my business, which is in Belgrade. How can we change that? And I think that's a big question. That could also probably be an entire webinar on its own.
Right. But I can give you a quick answer. Google has 3 elements in their local ranking algorithm: proximity, which you win on; relevance; and prominence, which you are losing on. Relevance is largely drawn from your website, review content, whatever, where your categories at Google, your categories elsewhere. Google doesn't think you're as relevant for that query as the next person, or Google doesn't think you're as prominent for that query as the next person. Prominence being inbound links, website mentions. So you need to build out your relevance and your prominence to extend your reach. I would say one thing, though, that most people are not searching using city names anymore. They're just doing auto repair or auto repair near me, less so, but more so than putting city names. So maybe it's the way you're searching, but if you're including city name, then relevance of your website has to include that city name as well. So either maybe your website isn't well structured or inbound links aren't well structured. We don't know. So is that a quick enough answer?
Awesome. I thought that was great. Yeah. And also, Elisa, if you want to continue learning this, check out the Related Docs tab, subscribe to the Near Memo podcast and the Local Business Growth podcast, as well as the newsletters. It's one of those things that's going to take some time and some work, but hopefully we can continue to help provide you with some helpful content to continue that learning and help you rank higher. Well, thank you guys so much for the Related Docs tab. So whenever you join the webinar, you basically get to rejoin this dashboard. So you'll get to see all these docs, everything else. And we'll also be able to pull some highlights as well. So we'll have a list of highlights in the on-demand version for you to watch as well. But thank you guys so much for tuning in today and sticking with us. I know we covered a lot of information, so be sure to go back and watch it again. Stay tuned for future webinars. We've got some incredible topics coming up. I'm sure with all the stuff going on in local search and AI, there'll be some really fascinating discussions coming. But don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn. We post everything there. We'll be having a post-webinar live stream next week. And yeah, we'll see you guys again soon. And thank you, Mike. It's an honor and it's a pleasure. I'm so happy that you were able to join us today. This is a lot of fun. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I too enjoyed it.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you guys later, and have a great rest of your week. And and watch a lot of basketball if you're a basketball fan. See you guys.
And don't if you're not.
Yeah. Awesome.